Hi, I'm Esmera. They said it was just a routine stop, just a faded military jacket on a nobody in the street. But that morning, as I knelt on hot concrete with a gun aimed at my face, I realized it wasn't just about me, it was about a family secret they were willing to kill for. They pulled the trigger. They thought I was gone. But they had no idea who they'd just shot, or what would happen when the sky began to move. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever discovered your family was hiding something that could get you killed? Let me know in the comments. This is the story they never wanted you to hear. I woke up before the alarm buzzed, the Houston dawn still clinging to darkness. I slid my hand under the pillow, pulling out Dad's faded military jacket, the cuffs frayed from years of silent service. I pressed it against my chest, whispering, "Dad, I need your strength today." I slipped it on, the fabric stiff around my shoulders, grounding me in a world that rarely felt steady. I checked on the coffee pot, making sure the drip caught right before I stepped outside. The neighborhood was quiet, the hum of sprinklers breaking the silence as I walked past the Johnson's house, where Mrs. Johnson was already tending her flowers. She waved, calling out, "Stay safe today, honey," like she always did, and I forced a smile, tucking my hands into the jacket's deep pockets. I could feel the weight of the meeting waiting for me at the hospital. I'd filed complaints against mismanagement, and I knew they were circling me, calling me a troublemaker under their breath. Even in my own family, it was the same. My brother Lyle flashing his badge at every cookout, my uncle with his endless stories of who owed him favors. I was just Esmera, the one who showed up, cleaned up, and kept quiet. But not today. I crossed the busy intersection near the corner store, stepping aside as a police cruiser roared past. I kept walking, clutching the strap of my bag, the morning sun warming the concrete under my sneakers. But the cruiser slowed down, its tires crunching against gravel as it stopped beside me. The window rolled down, and Sheriff Clay Bostwick leaned out, chewing on something, a smirk dancing on his lips. "Well, would you look at that?" he drawled, eyes darting to Dad's jacket. "You think that means something, huh?" I kept walking, ignoring him, but he opened the door, stepping out, boots hitting the pavement with a deliberate thud. "Ma'am, stop right there." I turned, swallowing the tightness in my throat. "Is there a problem, Sheriff?" "Got a call about a suspect matching your description," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "Need you to kneel right here on the sidewalk." My stomach twisted. "On what grounds?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said, pulling his belt higher, his hand brushing against the holster. People started to slow down, pulling out phones, whispering. My heart thudded so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. "Your daddy's jacket doesn't mean anything here," he said, tilting his head, his eyes cold. I looked around, at the faces peeking through curtains, the cars rolling to a stop. A mother pulled her child closer. I could feel the heat of the pavement through my jeans, the jacket heavy on my shoulders as I slowly sank to my knees, the morning sun baking into my skin. I closed my eyes, and in that moment I saw Dad's funeral, the way they folded the flag, the way Mom's hands shook as she clutched it to her chest. That jacket had meant dignity, honor, a promise that we mattered, that we were seen. And here I was, kneeling in the street, the gun pointed at my face, as if none of that mattered. I opened my eyes, meeting Clay's stare, his finger flexing near the trigger. My lips parted, but before I could speak, a gunshot cracked through the air. It felt like fire tearing through my abdomen, the force knocking me back onto the hot concrete. The pain was a scream trapped in my throat as blood soaked through the jacket, spreading like a dark bloom. People screamed, a phone clattered to the ground, someone yelled, "Call 911!" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, my vision tunneling as I stared at the sky. The world tilted, blue lights flashing, sirens wailing, the chop of helicopter blades slicing through the chaos. In the chaos, I heard it, soft, in my ear, a voice I had kept hidden from everyone, a voice that wasn't supposed to know where I was. "Esmera, hold on. Extraction protocol in progress." I tried to lift my head, but darkness crowded the edges of my sight. My fingers trembled as I pressed them against the wound, the jacket sticky under my palm. "Dad," I whispered, tasting blood. "They're going to find out who I really am." The words were still warm on my tongue as the world narrowed into a pinpoint of sound and light. "Dad, they're going to find out who I really am." I wasn't sure if I whispered it to the sky or just to myself, but the moment it slipped out, the chaos around me shifted. The sirens pierced through the noise of screaming bystanders as paramedics lifted me, strapping me onto a stretcher with quick, practiced hands. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was a heavy, swallowing ache, each bump on the pavement rattling through my body. One of the paramedics pressed hard on my side, shouting over the siren, "BP's dropping, stay with us, okay?" The ambulance's lights blurred through the windows, flickering like a memory I didn't ask for. The last time I heard gunfire this close, it wasn't aimed at me. It was at my father's funeral, a salute that cracked the Texas air as they folded the flag, as Mom wept so quietly that day, holding that triangle of fabric like it was the last piece of him she'd ever touch. I pressed my eyes shut, the smell of gun oil and starched uniforms pushing through the siren's wail. When I opened them again, the harsh lights of the hospital ceiling replaced the sky. They were moving fast, voices layered over each other. 2 liters, wide open. We need a unit now, pulse weak. It wasn't just any hospital, it was mine. The hallways I'd walked every day, the faces I passed with nods of tired understanding, were now frozen in shock as they recognized me, blood seeping through Dad's jacket. I caught sight of Lyle, my brother, standing near the hallway, eyes wide, lips pressed tight as he saw me on the gurney. His badge hung heavy on his chest, the reflection of the overhead lights trembling in the polished metal. We never had many words for each other. Him, the hero in Mom's eyes, the one who protected the family, while I was the one who held everything together in silence. Now the weight of seeing me there knocked the breath from his lungs, even if he tried to hide it. Behind him, just out of the chaos, Sheriff Clay leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze scanning the room, pretending concern. His eyes flicked over the jacket, then to me, and for a second, the corner of his mouth lifted in a smirk he quickly buried under a mask of fake pity. I saw it. He knew exactly what he had done. They wheeled me into a bright room, voices fading as the anesthesia clouded my vision. I tried to fight it, but the heaviness pulled me under. The sound of the machines beeped softly, merging with the memory of Dad's voice, whispering on the night before his last deployment, "You'll know when it's your turn to stand up." I was 9, standing in the living room, the oversized military jacket swallowing me whole as I looked in the mirror, making a silent promise to protect people, to be worthy of the name stitched above the pocket. The promise felt distant, like a dream half-remembered, until that moment under the fluorescent lights, bleeding into the fabric he once wore. I woke up with a gasp, the hospital room still, the smell of antiseptic clinging to the air. The pain was there, alive, pulsing with every breath. I turned my head slowly, seeing Dad's jacket hanging on the chair, dark stains dried into the fabric. I wanted to touch it, but my arm was heavy, an IV taped to the back of my hand, monitors chirping softly beside me. A vibration hummed against the thin mattress. I blinked, adjusting to the dim light, reaching for my phone tucked beneath the pillow, hidden from the eyes that would pry. The screen flickered to life, and a message, coded in a way only Dad would have taught me to read, glowed on the cracked glass. "You have been activated." My pulse spiked, ignoring the protest of the machines. Dad's connections, his warnings about the systems he worked for, the ones that existed under layers of clearance and black ink, weren't just bedtime stories or drunken whispers at the dinner table. A dormant protocol tied to the RFID tag sewn into the jacket's lining had awakened, pinging across a network I barely understood, triggering an alert I had prayed would never come. The helicopters I heard earlier weren't news choppers, and the unmarked SUVs creeping into Houston weren't just here for crowd control. They were here for me, and they were here because of Clay, because of what he did. I pushed myself up slowly, teeth clenched, ignoring the fire tearing through my side. I needed to move. I needed to think. The world outside the window looked the same. Cars moving down the street, people living lives that didn't know the quiet war unfolding beneath them. But I knew now that this wasn't just about me, wasn't just about a small woman in a jacket kneeling in the street. I wasn't going to let Clay walk away from this. I wasn't going to let anyone think I'd stay quiet. My fingers tightened around the rail of the hospital bed, grounding myself in the moment, in the breath I still had, in the promise I made when I first wore Dad's jacket. If they think I'll stay quiet now, they don't know me at all. I let the words hang in the quiet. I'm coming for every single one of you. Before the hospital silence swallowed them up. The steady beep of monitors became the only rhythm in the early dawn, rain tapping gently against the window like a memory trying to get in. The world outside moved on, unaware that I was breathing when I shouldn't be, that each inhale scraped against the stitched wound in my side, reminding me I was still here, for a reason. They thought I'd be silent, that fear would shut me down. But fear is a strange companion when you've lived under its shadow all your life. It doesn't disappear, but it teaches you to listen. A nurse cracked the door, sliding in to check my vitals, eyes darting anywhere but my face. She didn't speak, just adjusted the IV before slipping out, leaving a scent of latex and antiseptic behind. I could hear voices in the hall, whispers that died when footsteps approached my room. My family's name was now on the lips of strangers, tied to flashing lights, a bleeding woman in a street, a jacket that wasn't supposed to matter. The door opened again, but it wasn't a nurse this time. Cressida, my sister, stepped in, her heels clicking on the tile like tiny hammers against glass. She wore her perfect hair and pressed blazer like armor, lips pinched as she looked at me lying there, tubes and wires framing my body, the faded jacket draped across the chair like a silent witness. "Well, Asmara," she started, closing the door with a soft click. "You've managed to make a mess of things again." I didn't answer, just watched her as she pulled a chair closer, sitting down as if she owned the air in this room. Her eyes swept over me, calculating, cold. I saw the folder in her hand, the papers sticking out like knives. "You think you're some hero now?" Her voice was too calm, the kind of calm that carries a threat beneath every word. "You think dragging our family name through the mud helps anyone?" I swallowed the dryness in my mouth, the pain sharpening as I shifted. "Someone had to stand up." She laughed, a small, bitter sound. "Stand up? Look at you, Asmara. You're lying in a hospital bed, bleeding all over Dad's old jacket, bringing the media, the police, God knows who else, down on us." I saw it then, the fear behind her eyes, the tremor in her fingers as she adjusted the papers. It wasn't about me bleeding in the street or the family's reputation. It was about what Dad left behind, what she was trying to protect. "What do you want, Cressida?" I asked, my voice low, steady. She pushed the papers toward me, her hand trembling as it rested on top. "Sign these. It's a non-disclosure. You'll say the shooting was a mistake. Drop any statements you're planning to make, for the family, Asmara." I closed my eyes, letting the pain center me, letting the sound of the rain remind me of Dad's boots on the porch when he came home, metals clinking against his chest. He looked at me that night, his eyes tired, and said, "They will come for what I left behind, not knowing you are the safeguard." I didn't understand it then, but I did now. Opening my eyes, I met Cressida's glare, seeing her desperation barely hidden behind her carefully managed expression. "You're afraid?" I said softly. "Don't be ridiculous." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked away. "You're afraid they'll take what you think is yours," I continued. "Afraid that Dad's jacket is worth more than the house you're trying to keep, the investments you're hiding." Her eyes snapped back to mine, rage and fear dancing together. "You don't know what you're talking about." I pushed the papers away, the edge of the folder cutting against my bandaged hand. "I'm not signing anything." "You'll ruin everything," she hissed. "You'll lose everything." "I already almost did," I said, the memory of the street, the heat of the pavement, the smell of blood heavy in the air flashing through me. I'm not your scapegoat." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor, anger flooding her features before she masked it again, smoothing her hair with trembling hands. "You're making a mistake, Asmara. Don't think I won't protect what's mine." I watched her leave, the door closing softly, the air in the room vibrating with the weight of her threat. Night fell slowly, the rain easing into a quiet drizzle. The nurses changed shifts, the hum of the machines blending with the occasional footsteps outside. I tried to rest, but the image of Cressida's face, the fear in her eyes, wouldn't leave me. I must have drifted off because I woke to the sound of the door opening softly. A nurse stepped in, her face partially hidden under her cap, moving quietly as she approached the IV stand. Something felt off. Her hands moved too quickly, too precisely, adjusting the drip with a practiced flick. "Didn't ask for anything," I muttered, my voice rough. She didn't respond, just kept her head down, pulling a syringe from her pocket, sliding it toward the IV port. That's when I saw it. A small camera clipped to her lanyard, a tattoo on her wrist, a snake coiled around a dagger, the same symbol Clay's crew used to mark their territory on the back streets. I didn't think. I pulled my arm back, ripping the IV out, pain flaring bright and hot as the needle popped free. The nurse lunged, but I grabbed her wrist, twisting hard, forcing the syringe to drop onto the bed. Her eyes widened, but I didn't let go. "You picked the wrong room," I hissed. She tried to pull away, but I shoved the call button, alarms blaring in the hallway. She tore away from me, bolting out the door just as security came running, shouting orders, chaos flooding the sterile quiet. Breathing hard, I pressed my hand against the wound, blood seeping through the thin gown, dripping onto the floor. I turned, seeing Dad's jacket on the chair, the fabric worn, stained but solid, a promise I wasn't done keeping. I pushed myself up, gripping the bed rail, every muscle in my body screaming in protest. I pulled the jacket on, the weight of it grounding me, reminding me of who I was, who I needed to be. I looked up, seeing the red light of the security camera blinking steadily in the corner of the room. I held its gaze, letting the silence fill the space between us before I spoke, clear and strong. "You picked the wrong soldier's daughter." Her next move was already forming in my mind as I eased back onto the bed, careful not to disturb the fresh bandages pressing into my skin. I could hear the hum of the hospital at dawn, the soft squeak of wheels on tile, the hush of nurses trading quiet updates. It was strange how calm everything felt, knowing I was about to rip my life out of this place, stitch by stitch. I watched the monitors track my heartbeat, the slow, stubborn pulse that reminded me I was still here, and then reached for the sensors, peeling them off one by one. Each beep that faded was like a door closing behind me, shutting down any thought that I would be kept here, docile, waiting for someone else to decide if I lived or died. With a disposable phone hidden in the pocket of my hospital gown, I stepped into the small bathroom, locking the door before pressing the number I still remembered. It rang twice, before a gravel voice answered. "It's Az," I whispered. "Code Ironwake." There was a pause, a quiet breath on the other end. "Copy that," the voice replied. Then the line went dead. I gripped the sink for a moment, letting the cool porcelain steady me, before slipping the phone into the trash. My reflection stared back at me, hair tangled, skin pale, eyes that had seen too much but refused to close. I wasn't going to hide anymore. When I opened the door, the hall was empty except for the nurse at the desk, who pretended to look busy. I nodded to her, moving with deliberate slowness, testing each step, each breath. My father's jacket was draped over my shoulders, the faded fabric heavier than any armor I could have worn. As I turned the corner, I saw him. Clay was standing at the far end, talking to two hospital security guards, his smile thin and false. He handed them a folder, tapping it once, leaning in to speak quietly, but his voice wasn't quiet enough. "She's mentally unstable," he was saying, flipping open what looked like my medical file. "We're doing this for her safety. You understand." I felt the guard's hand on my shoulder before I saw him. My eyes flicked to his, calm and cold. "Would you like me to prove how unstable I am right here?" or later in court. My words were soft, measured, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes, the way his fingers twitched before he let go. Clay's eyes met mine, and I saw it, the fear he tried to bury under that sheriff's badge, the fear of being seen for what he truly was. I gave him a small smile, just enough to let him know I wasn't afraid of him, not anymore. I turned, heading for the elevator, the click of my shoes on the floor a steady rhythm. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of myself on the security feed above the nurse's station. A woman in a hospital gown, blood seeping through the fabric, a military jacket wrapped tight around her shoulders, eyes steady and clear. An image waiting to be twisted, turned into something it wasn't, if they got the chance. My pocket vibrated. I pulled out the second phone, a cheap burner, and saw the message flash across the screen. "You're live." They were watching me, listening. Every step, every breath, recorded. I pressed the phone against my chest for a moment before tucking it away. The elevator doors opened, the cool air of the lobby washing over me as I stepped out. I saw Clay waiting near the ambulance exit, leaning against the wall like a man with nowhere to be, like he owned the space. "It didn't have to be like this, Asmara," he said, pushing off the wall as I approached. "Just sign the papers, and it all goes away." I stopped, tilting my head slightly. "You're afraid of what I know." His eyes narrowed. "You think you're untouchable because of your father's ghost? You're alone now." I stepped closer, just enough to see the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand twitched near his belt. "Wrong. I'm awake now." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't have the leverage you think you do." I looked down, brushing my fingers over the seam of the jacket, where a small recorder was stitched, the red light blinking softly, capturing every word. "We'll see." Clay stepped back, confusion flickering across his face before he masked it again, turning sharply as a nurse approached with a wheelchair. She was older, her eyes kind, and I recognized her as one of Dad's friends from the VFW. She didn't speak, just nodded, and I let her help me into the chair, biting back a groan as the pain flared. We rolled past Clay, his eyes following us, his mouth opening as if to speak, but nothing came out. The nurse pushed me through the rear lot, where the rain was starting to fall again, washing the air clean. I watched as the hospital grew smaller behind us, the lights glowing in the mist, the place that tried to keep me silent fading into the distance. I gripped my father's jacket, pulling it tighter around me, the fabric warm despite the chill in the air. "You'll all see soon," I whispered, letting the promise sink into the rain. The war was only just beginning, and I felt it in the quiet hum of the car as it rolled through the damp streets of Chicago. The safe house wasn't much, just a 2-story brick building wedged between a laundromat and a shuttered deli, the neon lights from across the street flickering in and out through the thin curtains. But it was enough. I eased myself out of the car with the help of the nurse who had driven me here, her warm hand steady under my elbow. She didn't say much, just gave me a small nod before pulling away, tires hissing over wet asphalt. I stood there for a moment, jacket heavy on my shoulders, breathing in the cold city air that tasted like rain and exhaust, reminding me that I was still alive, still standing. Inside, the place smelled like old coffee and dust. The furniture was mismatched, a sagging couch, a chipped table, but it was quiet, and for now, it was safe. The L train rattled overhead every few minutes, the vibrations settling into my bones like a constant reminder to keep moving, to not let the fear root me to the floor. I sat down at the table, spreading out the few items I had managed to grab before leaving: a burner phone, a small notebook, and a photo of my father in uniform, his eyes tired but determined, the same way I felt now. I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb, whispering, "I'm not done, Dad." The phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed Elowen, my sister. I didn't know why I thought she might help, maybe because somewhere deep down I still believed blood meant something. When her voice came through, it was cold, sharp. "You should have just signed, Asmara." My chest tightened. "Elowen, they shot me. They tried to kill me." She sighed like I was a nuisance. Clay promised protection, but you're making it impossible. You're ruining everything Dad worked for. The words cut deeper than the bullet ever did. You're working with him. You're unstable as, she snapped. You always have been. I ended the call before she could say anything else, my hand trembling as I set the phone down. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in as the truth settled in my chest. My own sister was helping the man who tried to kill me, using my pain, my survival, as leverage to keep me out of whatever inheritance or power Dad left behind. It wasn't about protecting me, it was about controlling what I could reveal. I let myself feel it for a moment, the betrayal, the burn in my throat as I swallowed down the hurt. But it passed, clearing out like a storm, leaving behind cold, focused resolve. I moved to the small closet, pulling out a fireproof box I had hidden years ago, back when Dad first started whispering about files that could save or destroy lives. Inside were his letters, mission logs, and an old flash drive wrapped in a piece of cloth. I plugged it into a battered laptop, the screen flickering to life, and began uploading everything to a secure server I still had access to from my time in the Army. Lines of code and progress bars filled the screen, the soft whir of the laptop fan mixing with the distant rumble of the train. Each file that uploaded was a small victory, a quiet promise that the truth would not die with me, no matter how hard they tried to erase me. As I waited, I checked the burner phone again, seeing notifications pop up. My breath caught as I saw the headlines, "Unstable Veteran Poses Threat. PTSD Victim Lashes Out." There were clips, edited hospital footage showing me clutching Dad's jacket, cut with moments where I stumbled, looking fragile, broken. They were painting me as a threat, a woman too damaged to be trusted. Fake profiles flooded the posts with comments, calling me a liability, a disgrace. It was Clay's network, working to discredit me before I could even open my mouth. I felt the heat rise in my chest, my pulse pounding, but I didn't let it drown me. Instead of screaming into the void, I turned on the laptop camera, sitting back so Dad's jacket was in view behind me. I looked into the lens, steady and clear. "My name is Asmara," I said softly. "I am not broken. I am awake, and the truth you're afraid of will see daylight." I saved the video, closing the laptop. Timing was everything, and I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me scramble. In the bathroom, I pulled up my shirt, looking at the scar on my abdomen, the ugly, healing reminder of what Clay had tried to do. I ran my fingers over it lightly, feeling the ridge of the stitches, whispering to my reflection, "You tried to erase me. Now you will see me." I pulled on Dad's jacket, the fabric rough, but comforting against my skin. It smelled like him, faintly like old leather and the outdoors, a reminder of the promise I had made him, the promise to stand when it mattered. Night had fallen by the time I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my cheeks, the streetlights casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. I walked down the narrow alley beside the building, finding a spot where the wind was blocked, pulling out the burner phone one last time. My fingers hovered over the screen before I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. The line rang, once, twice, before a voice answered, rough with sleep. "It's time," I said, my voice calm, certain. There was a pause, then a low laugh. "About damn time, Az." I hung up, sliding the phone into my pocket, stepping back out into the street with my head high. The trap was set, and for the first time in a long time I felt ready. The trap was set, but traps require bait, and bait bleeds. I felt every step as I left the alley and caught the dawn train across town, the metal wheels screeching like a warning under my boots. Chicago's gray light was filtering through as I stepped off at a forgotten station, pulling Dad's jacket closer around me while cold air bit at my face. It smelled like rain and steel, a scent that forced me to stay awake. I walked 2 blocks to the diner near the freight yard, the place where men who were too tired to dream came for coffee before a long shift. The door chimed, and I found Jorah in a corner booth, his rough hands wrapped around a mug that had seen better days, the steam rising in lazy curls. "Sit," he said quietly, not looking up as he slid an envelope across the chipped table. The edge caught on a sugar packet, leaving a line in the dust. "You need to see this." I slid in across from him, careful not to wince at the tug in my side where the stitches still held me together. I opened the envelope with steady fingers, pulling out transaction records, names, numbers I recognized from Dad's hidden files. It was bigger than family. Bigger than me. These names were the kind you only whispered when the door was locked, men who traded blood for profit under the shield of their office badges. Jorah finally looked at me, his eyes tired. "You understand, don't you? This is a war you can't walk away from." "I never intended to walk away," I told him, sliding the papers back inside. My voice was calm, but every word cost me a breath. We finished our coffee in silence. I could see his reflection in the diner window, the deep worry on his face mirrored in the glass. When I stood to leave, he only said, "Be careful, Az." Outside, the cold was sharper, cutting through the thin dawn. I tucked the envelope under my jacket, keeping it close to the warmth of my body, before stepping away from the diner and into the soft hum of the waking city. Hours later, a knock on the door of the small room I was using as a base echoed louder than it should have. I opened it to find a package on the ground, no return address, the brown paper damp from the lingering drizzle. I carried it inside, closing the door, heart thudding in my chest as I tore the paper away. It was a photograph, grainy but clear. My niece, Elowen's little girl, walking home from school, backpack swinging, her ponytail bouncing with each step. Underneath was a note in thick black ink, "Stay silent, or she disappears." My breath froze in my lungs, the room closing in. My hands shook as I set the photo down, pressing my palms into the table to steady them. The rage was there, hot and pulsing, but beneath it was a colder resolve, steel sharpening inside me. "You think this will stop me?" I whispered to the empty room. My voice was calm, but it was the calm that comes before a storm. I sank into a chair, clutching Dad's dog tags in my hand, their cold metal grounding me as I closed my eyes. His voice came back to me, low and steady. "The hardest battles are the ones you fight with yourself." I opened my eyes, the decision made. I wouldn't let fear make me a prisoner. Pulling out the old laptop, I loaded the files Jorah had given me alongside the ones I had been holding onto for years. I encrypted them, sending them in fragments to an independent journalist I knew, a woman who had exposed police corruption before and lived to tell it. My message was simple: if I go silent, publish everything. Her reply came swiftly: "Understood. We'll protect the source." I closed the laptop, exhaling slowly, letting the quiet seep into me. The ticking clock had begun, each second a reminder that I had made my choice, and now there was no turning back. As evening fell, I slipped out of the building, the cold air hitting me like a warning. Clay's men were there, leaning against cars across the street, pretending to scroll on their phones, but their eyes followed me, dark and calculating. I kept walking, head high, hands in my pockets. At a storefront window, I caught my reflection, Dad's jacket draped over my shoulders, the tired but unbroken woman staring back at me. "They think I'm afraid," I said softly to my reflection. "But I am not afraid anymore." I turned away, pulling out my phone as I stepped into the shadows of an alley, typing a message to Jorah. "Ready to finish this." I hit send, the screen going dark in my hand as I tucked it away. I pulled the jacket tighter, feeling the weight of it, the history, the promise it carried. The sky above was dark, clouds rolling over the city, but I welcomed it. The storm was coming, and this time I would be the lightning. The trap was set, and I felt it in my bones as the chill of dawn settled over Chicago. I stood by the window of the safe house, watching steam rise from vents across the cracked pavement while L trains clattered above. The world was waking up, but for me, the day had never ended. I checked the messages on my burner phone one last time before pulling Dad's jacket tight around my shoulders and stepping out into the cold. I didn't drive to the meeting. I walked the final stretch, each step grounding me as I approached the abandoned National Guard depot on the city's edge. Rust streaked the fences, and the sky pressed low, heavy with the promise of rain. This was the place Clay had chosen, where he thought control was his birthright. When I arrived, Clay was already there, leaning against a black SUV, flanked by two men who didn't bother hiding the bulge under their jackets. His smirk was practiced, confident, the smirk of a man who thought he owned the ground he stood on. "You could have lived quietly, he called out as I approached. "Now you'll leave quietly." I kept walking until I was close enough to see the lines on his face, the twitch in his jaw that betrayed the calm he was trying to hold. The air smelled of rust and oil, and the wind tugged at the edges of my hair as I stared him down. "Let's not pretend, Clay," I replied. "You're here because you're afraid." His laughter was sharp, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Afraid? Of you?" He glanced at his men, shaking his head. "You're a liability, You've always been. Your father's legacy? I'm protecting it, protecting the family." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, flipping it open to show me pages filled with printed reports. My name highlighted words like mental instability, violent tendencies, unfit. A weapon aimed at my credibility. "This is all it takes," he said. "One call and your name is mud. No one will listen to a crazy woman no matter what she says." I let him finish, let him believe he had the upper hand, then reached into my pocket and pulled out the small recorder, pressing play. His voice, dripping with arrogance from a drunken call weeks ago, filled the air. "Arms deals, easy money. Who cares about a few dead bodies if the check's clear?" His smirk cracked, eyes darting to his men, whose expressions shifted from bored to uncertain. The silence that followed was thick, the only sound the distant hum of traffic and the cry of a seagull circling overhead. "You think you're untouchable, Clay?" I said quietly. "You're wrong." One of his men's phones buzzed, and he glanced down, his face paling as he read the headline, "Federal investigation into local arms smuggling underway." I saw the moment Clay realized control was slipping, his jaw tightening, his fingers clenching around the folder. "It's over," I told him, stepping forward, my boots scraping against gravel. "The sky's already moving." A car pulled up then, the screech of tires cutting the tension as Elowen stepped out, her hair pulled back tight, her face pale under the morning light. She walked up slowly, her eyes on mine, then shifting to Clay. "I'm here to mediate," she said, her voice flat. Clay turned to her, relief flashing in his eyes. "Good. Talk some sense into your sister." But I saw the tremor in Elowen's hands, the slight nod she gave me, eyes flicking toward my pocket where the second flash drive rested. "Elowen," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm, "you need to be very clear right now." She swallowed, her eyes glossy, but she turned to Clay. "She's right. You've gone too far." Clay's face twisted, confusion mixing with rage. "You told me you'd handle her, Elowen." "I did," she said softly. "But not like this." He stepped toward her, but I moved between them, my hand steady as I pulled the decoy flash drive from my pocket, holding it out. "You want it?" I asked him, meeting his glare. "You think I'm scared because you point a gun at me? You already pulled that trigger once, Clay. Missed your chance." The words hit him harder than any punch could. I tossed the drive toward him, and as he lunged to catch it, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, blue lights bouncing off the rusted walls of the depot. Clay turned to me, his eyes wide. "What did you do?" I didn't flinch. "What needed to be done?" He looked at Elowen, betrayal flashing in his gaze as agents swarmed the depot's perimeter, shouting commands, weapons raised. His men hesitated, unsure, their confidence cracking as the reality of the situation set in. I turned to Elowen, our eyes locking as the chaos erupted around us. I could see the tears she was trying to hold back, the weight of choices pressing down on both of us. "You need to choose," I told her, my voice calm despite the storm. "Now." Elowen's eyes flicked between me and Clay, the sirens outside building into a shrill promise of chaos about to crash through those rusted depot doors. I saw the fear dancing in her gaze, but behind it was something else. Regret, perhaps. Or the last flicker of a sister who had once braided my hair on Sunday mornings before church, who taught me to tie my shoes and let me crawl into her bed when the storms were too loud. Clay's voice sliced through the moment. "Elowen, do it! Now!" His hand disappeared into his waistband, pulling a gun, finger trembling as it hovered near the trigger. I braced, weight shifting to the balls of my feet, ready to fight, ready to feel the pain I knew was coming if she chose him. I had a plan, but plans only mattered if you had the breath to execute them. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. The smell of wet concrete, the cold iron scent of approaching rain, the glint of Dad's jacket buttons under the depot lights. Elowen moved, her hand reaching for me, and then she spun, faster than I could track, smacking Clay's wrist so hard the gun flew, clattering against the cement. She screamed, a raw, breaking sound. "Enough!" Clay stumbled back, shock wide on his face, the kind of shock that said he truly believed he could never lose control of her. One of his men stepped forward, confusion twisting across his features, but hesitation froze him mid-stride. I didn't give hesitation time to decide. I kicked the gun, sending it skittering under a rusted shelf. "Don't!" Clay bellowed, his voice cracking as the sirens stopped, replaced by the pounding of boots and shouted commands. Red and blue lights strobed across the high windows, washing over the broken concrete as federal agents burst in, weapons raised, vests heavy with authority. Clay turned, trying to run, but Elowen lunged, tackling him to the ground, fists pounding his chest as she screamed words I couldn't fully catch over the noise. The enforcers lifted their hands in surrender, dropping to their knees as the agents swarmed them, zip ties snapping tight. Helicopters roared above, spotlights slicing through the darkness. For a moment, the sky moved, a living thing pressing down, judgment in the whir of blades and floodlights. Clay's shouts echoed through the depot. "You don't know who you're dealing with! This isn't over!" Elowen pushed herself off him, hair wild, blood streaking her lip from where Clay had struck her in the scuffle. She looked up at me, shoulders shaking, tears streaking grime down her face. "I couldn't let him do it to you," she whispered, voice so small I almost didn't hear it. I dropped to my knees, Dad's jacket pulling around me as the cold seeped into my bones, but I welcomed it. The rain came then, gentle at first, tapping on the metal roof before turning into a drumbeat that filled the silence Clay's screams left behind. Agents lifted Clay, dragging him toward the door as he kicked and spat, reduced to nothing but noise and empty threats. One of them, a woman with hard eyes softened by understanding, paused beside me, nodding. It wasn't a thank you. It was an acknowledgement of what it took to get here, of the cost it demanded. I let my forehead drop to the jacket, the scent of old cotton and Dad's aftershave still clinging to the fabric. I could hear his voice, steady and calm, even in memory, reminding me that storms don't always destroy. They can clear the air, wash away the rot, let new things grow. I wasn't the same woman who had knelt in the street, forced to the ground under the weight of a badge and the lie that I was nothing. I had scars now, inside and out, but they were mine, proof that I had stood up, that I had fought, that I had survived. Elowen sank beside me, her hand brushing against mine before she pulled it back, unsure. Her eyes searched mine, full of questions we weren't ready to answer. "Now what do we do with the pieces?" she asked, her voice so quiet it was almost part of the rain. I lifted my head, meeting her gaze with a calm I hadn't felt in a long time. The depot around us buzzed with agents securing evidence, Clay's rants growing fainter as they loaded him into a van, the helicopters pulling back as the immediate threat fell quiet. I didn't have the answer, not yet. But I knew one thing. This wasn't the end. The past was broken, scattered across too many nights and too many wounds, but it didn't mean the future had to be. "First," I said, standing slowly, the jacket heavy but comforting on my shoulders, "we gather what's left." She nodded, tears fresh but determination there, the sister I remembered flickering back to life. "And then," I continued, letting the rain wash over us, "we build something better." The morning air smelled like rain and new beginnings as Elowen and I stepped out of the federal building, the weight of 1,000 decisions hanging between us? Her question still echoed in the silence between car doors closing and engines starting. Now what do we do with the pieces? The drive to the hospital was quiet, the roads still wet from the downpour the night before. Puddles reflected the gray sky, but the clouds were breaking, sunlight slicing through in thin, determined beams that felt like a promise. In the hospital waiting room, I sat with the faded jacket folded on my lap, the fabric worn soft by time, and the battles it had witnessed. A nurse checked the stitches on my arm, making small talk I barely heard, her words like background static to the churn of thoughts in my mind. Elowen sat beside me, her cheek bruised and her hands restless in her lap. We watched the sunrise through the large window, light creeping over the city's rooftops, turning the rust on the cars into something almost beautiful. "I didn't think I'd have the courage," she whispered, her eyes not leaving the glass. "Neither did I admitted, adjusting the jacket so the sun touched its faded colors. "But we did it." She let out a breath, shaky, the kind that carries years of fear finally leaving the body. "They're saying Clay's arrest is just the beginning, that the network he worked for is crumbling." I nodded. It was always bigger than him. It was about fear, control. She turned to look at me, her eyes wet. I was scared I thought siding with him would protect us. I held her gaze, seeing not just the sister who hurt me, but the woman who stood up when it mattered. "I know. But you chose differently when it counted." Later that week, I walked back into my neighborhood, the cracked sidewalks familiar under my boots. News vans had come and gone, neighbors watching from porches, whispering over fences. Some nodded at me, eyes full of gratitude. Others turned away, their faces tight with fear or anger. At the community center, the folding chairs creaked under the weight of neighbors who didn't know what to say. An older man stood up, shaking his head. "You brought all this trouble here, Asmara, the raids, the agents. You brought it here." I met his gaze, steady. "It was already here," I said quietly. "I just refused to kneel for it again." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that makes people examine their own choices. A woman in the back nodded, clutching her child's hand a little tighter. After the meeting, I walked to the cemetery, the jacket draped over my arm. The grass was damp, the headstones lined like quiet witnesses to the choices we make. I found Dad's grave, the letters of his name smoothed by years of wind and rain. Kneeling, I laid the jacket over the stone, pressing my palm against it. "I get it now," I whispered. "Why you fought. Why you didn't always tell us everything." A breeze lifted the edge of the jacket, just enough to make it look like it was reaching for the sky, reminding me of that day on the street when I thought the world was ending, but it was just beginning. I sat there a while, letting the memories settle, letting the grief move through me without drowning me. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe in the quiet. Walking back through the neighborhood, I saw kids riding bikes, a mother calling them in for lunch. A boy struggled with his bike chain, frustration on his face. I knelt down, showing him how to fix it, my hands steady, the sun warm on my back. "Thanks, Miss Az," he said, looking up at me with a gap-toothed grin before pedaling off. Standing, I touched the small piece of Dad's jacket I had tucked into my pocket, the fabric a reminder that some battles are worth fighting, even when they leave scars. Sometimes it takes nearly losing everything to understand what you're meant to protect. I was the quiet one, the one who blended into the background, the one everyone thought would keep her head down forever. Not anymore. As I reached my porch, I looked back at the street, at the neighbors who once saw me as invisible. The place I once felt trapped in now felt different, a place I could shape, a place I could